What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I am your host, Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. Before we get into that, a quick call to action. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, follow, subscribe so that you don't miss any of our content here on the Fans First Sports Network, the FFSN NFL feed. That's this show. That's the Draft Dynasty podcast, Coach's Call Sheet podcast. And we're going to have a lot of stuff coming up with training camp just a few weeks away. If you're watching this on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the Fans First Sports Network channel so that you get all of our great content. But with that out of the way, Coach Kevin Smith, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing great, man. We're in the dog days of summer. And I just told Jeff before the show that half my neighborhood is on our slip and slide in the yard right now. And I'll try to ship them off to the beach pretty soon. But so it's funny you say to some parents, like, yeah, the kids are welcome at our house. They don't hesitate. They're just like, okay. And then they'll dump them and go. So I got to be careful what I offer.
The dog days of summer, indeed. And it's hot. And but to me, it means like, hey, training camp is just around the corner. And that's right. 2 weeks away. Training camps will be starting up. It starts at a different time based on teams that are in the Hall of Fame game, starting earlier because they have that extra preseason game. But with 2 weeks away, and which, by the way, Coach, when do you start your high school camp? When do they actually go back and start your training camp?
Well, we've been going. We go pretty much all summer.
Okay.
We had a mini camp in June, and then I gave them like 8 days off. But now we're back into the 3-4 day a week grind in July.
Oh, so the state of New Jersey doesn't tell you when you can and can't do things.
They have an official start date. Like you can't have complete full padded practices until a certain date, but you can do organized workouts, OTAs, so to speak, all summer.
I love it. All right. So with camp 2 weeks away, this is interesting because there's a lot of veteran defensive backs that are just still out there on the open market. You know, here we are. It's incredible. Let's throw out some names. Stephon Gilmore, Justin Simmons, Patrick Peterson, Xavier Howard, Micah Hyde. These are highly decorated players, and they don't even have a home yet. Coach, do you think there's a reason why? Why do so many of these accomplished players not have a home yet?
Yeah, I kind of do believe there's a reason, and I think it's twofold. One, a lot of these guys in their 30s, almost all of them, if not all of them, in their 30s, they're reasonably well compensated guys. They'd probably be willing to sign for the veteran minimum at this point, but I don't think teams felt as though they needed to pick up their contract or offer them a new contract when they knew that they could probably get them at this time of year for fairly cheap. These are also guys who don't need a lot of training camp time to get up to speed, guys that you could probably sign in August, get them into your facility for a week or two, and they'd have the playbook down because they've been around for a long time. But I also think another factor is just the emphasis on speed in the league, the fact that the defensive back position is such a high premium on it, and the young guys coming out of the draft are really well prepared. It's incredible how intricate coverages have gotten in college. College schemes are in some regard as involved as pro schemes. Guys are learning not just your basic coverages like cover 1, 2, 3, et cetera, but the more complex stuff, the combination coverages, cover 6, cover 7, those types of things. And so the young guys who can run and who also are pretty well versed in the schemes, I think are valued higher. So I will be shocked if some of these guys, some of the names you just mentioned, if they don't wind up signing in the next few weeks, but I don't think it's a coincidence that they're still available.
What do you think would be the latest point where for even these veterans that have been around the block, I mean, some of them are, I think Stephon Gilmore might have been Defensive Player of the Year at one point. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but he's been in the mix. All these players that are highly decorated, what is the last possible time that you would say, even though they're a veteran, they got to get acclimated to the system, they got to get acclimated to their teammates? What would that point be in your opinion?
I think when you go to training camp, you want to make sure that the guys that you're bringing in are going to be players who have the full complement of practices in order to get up to speed. So within the next couple of weeks for sure. But, you might get into camp and find that a guy who you really liked suddenly isn't able to cut it. Or then, of course, you always have the injuries, things like that. So it won't be surprising to see some of these guys signed in camp. And for the guys who don't get signed, then they become now the players who you'll see wind up being midseason pickups. Like take the Steelers, for example. They got devastated at the linebacker position last year and wound up basically signing Miles Jack off the couch for the stretch run. And one of these guys could fall into that same boat.
It's going to be interesting to see where some of these players end up. If there's any of them that, okay, let's go to the list that we have here. Stephon Gilmore, Justin Simmons, Patrick Peterson, Xavier Howard, Micah Hyde. Out of those 5 players, which of any do you see potentially not having a team by the time the regular season rolls around?
What's Xavier Howard's status? Didn't he get jammed up with a sexual assault allegation?
I'm trying to think. That rings a bell, but okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that, but I think he kind of got jammed up with something along those lines. That could jeopardize him. Stephon Gilmore is now 37 years old. He was always a speed guy. I wonder if he can run like he used to be able to run. Now he's also a great technician and a guy who's excellent at his craft. And so a team that would need maybe a man-heavy team that would be looking for a third or fourth guy might be willing to take a chance on him. Peterson, I'm really surprised hasn't signed yet because I thought he did some good things in Pittsburgh last year. So, I don't know. The Steelers seem to have a pretty full now, they signed Cam Sutton, a pretty full complement of defensive backs. So it'll be interesting to see if anybody picks him up. He made an interesting remark recently where he said on the Pivot podcast that he wants to sign another contract. He still feels like he can play, but if it doesn't work out, then he is at peace with his career and he knows that he's walked away from the game healthy, and that would allow him to feel comfortable going into retirement. So maybe Peterson might be a guy where, hey, look, if the situation's not right, he's not coming back.
Yeah, and he doesn't need the money. He probably does. It's just one of those situations where unless the situation is perfect, I'm playing for a team, a coach, a defensive scheme that fits my skill set, I don't need this. And that's got to be a pretty freeing feeling, I got to imagine. All right, let's go to our next topic. A recent article from the website, the 33rd Team, cited Justin Jefferson, Micah Parsons, and Penei Sewell as the league's 3 best players under the age of 25 years old. If you were starting a franchise and could have one of those 3 players, which would you take?
Well, it was interesting that they didn't have any quarterbacks there because that's such a marquee position. I think the highest ranked quarterback they had under the age of 25 was CJ Stroud. I think they had him at 7th.
Okay.
It's very tempting to take Jefferson because I think he's the most talented of the 3. But I'm a big believer of building from the inside out. So if you're letting me build a team from scratch, almost like an expansion team, and I get to select one of these guys, I'm taking Sewell, even though he probably has the least obvious impact. Jefferson makes splash plays. Micah Parsons makes splash plays. The sacks and the touchdowns, those are things that leap out to everybody. But with a young franchise, I want to make sure that we can protect the quarterback and that we can try to control time of possession and the clock. And the best way to do that is to build a great offensive line. I think Sewell is a Hall of Famer if he stays healthy. He is a special talent. The way he moves at his size and how physical he is, that combination doesn't really come around very often. So I'd take him.
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to go with the Sewell route, and Micah Parsons is a phenomenal talent. But to me, like Justin Jefferson is up there in terms of talent, but at the same time, he is reliant on someone to throw him the football. So I feel like a receiver cannot be a cornerstone piece of an organization or a franchise because, well, they can only do so much. They can only catch passes thrown from someone else. So that's why I was shocked, and I was going to say before you did, that there were no quarterbacks on this list. CJ Stroud, I would probably take him over a Justin Jefferson because, well, he's going to have the football in his hands every time the offense takes a snap. So I would agree with you with these 3 players. I'll take Sewell as well. But I would love to say Justin Jefferson from a talent perspective. But again, he can't throw the ball to himself. Someone said that once. I can't remember which receiver said that, but still.
I think Giselle said that about Tom Brady.
Maybe that is what it was.
Pissed about the receivers that they had. But you're right. That's the receivers. Like if that's a 3-part process, build the line, get the quarterback, acquire the receivers. I think that the receiver part comes last. You can argue all you want about whether you want to have the line first or the quarterback first. But either way, the receiver is dependent upon both those other things being in place for him to be extremely effective.
Well, and let me ask you this question too, because Micah Parsons, I find him comical with some of his football takes that he says on social media, but edge rushers, how many edge rushers are there in the game today that you could say this is a cornerstone piece of the puzzle? So we would say TJ Watt for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You would say, I hate to say it, but Myles Garrett of the Cleveland Browns. I would put Micah Parsons possibly in that mix. Is there anyone else that you can think of? Like, is Max Crosby in that list? Are the Bosa brothers in that list of that echelon? What's your thoughts there?
I think the 3 guys you named are clearly in a separate category. I think it's those 3 guys, and you can argue all you want. That'd be another interesting question. If you could take one of those 3, who would you take? I don't think there's a 4th guy. I don't think there's another person you add to that group who's in that same class. I would love to see the numbers on when Parsons or Garrett don't play, what the record is of those teams. I don't, Parsons is pretty young still. I don't know how many games he's missed, but you and I are both familiar with the incredible numbers when TJ Watt is out of the lineup. The Pittsburgh Steelers are something like 1-13. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's along those lines. So his impact is incredible in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's go to number 3. Let's do a quick over-under on the projected win totals. Odds makers have laid out for some of the league's high-profile teams. I've got a different line on the Steelers. You have the Steelers at 7.5. I've seen them at 8.5. We'll talk about both. Let's start with the New York Giants, though. The win total is 6.5. Would you take the over or the under for Daniel Jones and the Giants this year?
6.5 is low.
But
believe it or not, I think I take the under. I think they're in bad shape. Look at the division. They're clearly, I think, the 4th best team in the division. I mean, they're not as good as Philly or Dallas. I think
you think the Commanders are better?
I think Washington has done some really good things this offseason. Okay. And I think that they have put themselves in a better position moving forward. Because think about the Giants. They lost Saquon Barkley, arguably their best offensive player. Darren Waller retired. Yep. Another one of their significant offensive players. And they've hitched the wagon, so to speak, to Daniel Jones. And that is a big gamble. I just don't know if that is going to pan out for them. They're not dynamic really on the offensive line. They're decent on defense, but they could be a mess on offense. And they're going to have to score some points, obviously. I would not be shocked if they wound up being like a 5-12 team.
I guess now that I talk it out and I'm thinking about the division, I'll take the under as well, but I think they get to 6. I think they get to 6 wins. Daniel Jones is in a make or break year, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plans out. Let's go with the Steelers. You had them at 7.5, but I've also had them at 8.5. I've seen that on multiple books. So let's just go with the 8.5 and see what you think there, and then we'll go from there. So it's Pittsburgh Steelers, 8.5 total. You taking the over, the under?
I'm taking the over. I said on the show last week, I thought that the Steelers were maybe a little bit underrated or under the radar. I think that they have made significant improvement. They won 10 games last year. And if you looked at their roster last year versus their roster this year, it's hard to argue they're not better right now than they were a year ago. And you can't just say, oh, well, they're better on paper, so that means they're going to win more than 10 games. And yes, they play in the hardest division in football. But I really feel as though the improvements that they've made are going to lead them to a very successful season.
I think, again, I mean, shoot, what's the number one criticism of Mike Tomlin, or the one record that Steeler fans hate the most? And that is, well, he never has a losing season. So if his watermark is 9 wins or up, you hammer the over here. 7.5. If you can get the Steelers at 7.5 in a book, put a lot of money down on the over. 8.5, that's a different discussion. It is a tough division. The Steelers have a tough schedule, but I still would take the over. I think this is a team that has a floor of 9 wins with a ceiling of maybe 13 if things fall their way and they stay healthy. So we will see. So, all right, let's go to the next team, the LA Chargers. Now they're at 8.5. What do you think about the Chargers with Justin Herbert?
The Chargers are a team. If I can hear my man Pez, I can hear his voice, telling me like, "Don't stay away, stay away," because I don't really have a feeling for the Chargers. I could see Harbaugh coming in there, rejuvenating that franchise. That franchise has almost always felt like it's underachieving.
Yeah.
And it certainly felt that way in the Brandon Staley years. And it just feels like Harbaugh's energy and some of the things that they've done, they're going to sort of build that team around his identity, try to be a bit of a smash mouth football team up front. I think Joe Alt is going to be a phenomenal player there. And they're going to make Justin Herbert's life a lot easier by probably protecting him better and giving him more play action and those types of things. But on the other hand, I can also see Harbaugh coming in with a lot of his college rah-rah and kind of trying to do Michigan 2.0 in the pros and it not working out, at least taking him a year to catch back up. So I've got no real vibe on the Chargers. I might take the over simply because I think other than Kansas City, that's not a great division. I think Vegas is okay. I think Denver's bad. So they might be able to win 4 games in the division. And then they'd have to go, 5-5 or 5-6 out of the division to get to 9 wins, which is achievable. So I might lean towards the over, but I'm definitely not sold.
If it's at 8.5, I'm taking the under. If it is at 7.5, I will actually take the over. I think they're going to be an 8-win team. It's going to be a step in the right direction. Clearly, whenever you're talking about gambling with these future bets, it's going to come down to health. If Justin Herbert gets hurt again, then throw it all out the window because it doesn't mean anything. But I think the Chargers, I agree with you. Tough team to get a feel for. We have no idea what they're going to look like. Gone is Austin Eckler. Gone is Keenan Allen. It's going to have a really new feel to it. We'll see what that looks like with the new head coach there and Harbaugh. Let's go with the New York Jets. Their line is I can't believe it's at 9.5. 9.5 wins for the New York Jets with Aaron Rodgers, who I think is on the cover of the AARP magazine. I'm kidding. So what do you think about the Jets at 9.5 wins?
I'm taking the under simply because when do the Jets ever go over your expectations? When's the last time you were like, man, the Jets have really exceeded my expectations? And my buddy Wayne, who I had on my Call Sheet podcast, who's a long-suffering Jets fan, I remember his message to me about the Jets was always anticipate the worst. Always anticipate the worst. And Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old. He hasn't played football in 2 years. Everybody says he looks great. But is he built to withstand a 17-game season, especially maybe if things don't start great? The Jets have like 5 primetime games in the first 8 weeks of the season, something like that.
Yeah.
And if it goes bad early, you can just see that whole thing blowing up. So they're another team they're hard to say. I mean, because obviously with Rodgers in the fold, it could go great. But I don't know, man. They're the Jets. I'd just take the under.
If they would have handled their minicamp drama differently, I would say take the over. But because they completely mishandled Rodgers going on vacation to Egypt, that's where he was, by the way. He wasn't in a dark retreat. He was at Egypt. He was in Egypt. That if they would have handled that differently, I would have said, let's take the over. And people might say, Jeff, like it's a mini camp story. How in the hell can you make this type of declaration? If they can't even manage that, how can they manage the regular season? And Aaron Rodgers is so dense that he doesn't know the dates of mandatory minicamp. I knew the dates of Steelers mandatory minicamp, and I'm not a player. I just cover the team from afar. So I just think that this is a dumpster fire organization. It's always been a dumpster fire organization. It's going to continue. 9.5 is too high. I take the under. They might be a 9-win team, but I'm not taking a double-digit team right now. I just think there's too much going on. So, all right, let's do the last team, the Dallas Cowboys. Again, these lines are insane. 10.5 wins in the NFC East. That's insane to me. So you know where I'm hedging, but what do you think?
No, I'm hedging in the same direction. Dallas might win 10 games. I mean, they've got a very talented roster. You talk about make or break. This is their year.
Yeah.
Mike McCarthy probably needs a really successful run to keep his job. They got to pay Dak Prescott. They got to pay CeeDee Lamb. They got a couple other guys that are up for some extensions. Micah Parsons is looming. They've got some hard decisions to make. And if they don't make a good run this year, and by a good run, we've cited this statistic before, they have not been past the divisional round since 1995. I think if they don't get to the NFC Championship game, they might wind up cleaning house. And so that's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure, and they're in a good division, and they play a tough schedule. I just don't see it happening. I don't see them being an 11-win team, maybe a 10-7, 9-8 team, but it just feels like they didn't. And again, they didn't really add any big pieces or significant pieces in the offseason. So I just question whether or not Dallas is the same team they were a year ago.
Oh, hey, and don't worry, Dak Prescott's out vacationing in a walking boot. That's right. They saw him wearing a walking boot. He's got some foot injury. Let it begin. The drama in Big D is already underway. I think that this is a team that could win 11 games or more. I just don't think that they do. This was there's my kids go to the mixed martial arts practice. There's a guy there's a big Cowboys fan, and free agency is happening, and he's like, Are the Cowboys going to do anything? I think they did nothing. Like, they made no significant improvements. Of course, the draft is the draft, but I'm going to take the under here. But I think it's 10 wins. I do think they get to 10 wins, but it's in terms of 10.5, I'll take the under. All right, let's go to our next topic. Speaking of betting lines, of 5 players with the best odds to win the MVP in 2024-2025, they're all quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, CJ Stroud, and Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson are the 5 front runners, according to most sports books. Pick the guy from that group you'd be willing to put money on to win the MVP award right now.
I'm going to take the boring answer and go with Mahomes, simply because until the league proves that they've figured him out, and it's not just him, it's him and Andy Reid. I think the two of them together make for probably the best quarterback coach duo, certainly since Belichick and Brady. But until they prove that they figured him out, he's just going to continue to be playing at a different level than anybody else. And when you figure in the speed that they've added to that offense this offseason, the worthy kid out of Texas who ran the 4.2 40, Marquise Brown from the Ravens is another Blazer. I mean, last year was supposed to be the year where they didn't have the weapons, and they still won the Super Bowl. Mahomes still played phenomenal football. And this year, it feels like the cupboard has been restocked. So, unless Travis Kelce goes down with a big injury or Mahomes obviously gets hurt, I just think he's the guy until somebody proves that they're the guy.
So we're talking odds because of my boy Pez and Pez's picks. You got to look at the numbers, right? So currently, according to DraftKings Sportsbook, Patrick Mahomes is plus 450 to win the MVP. Not bad odds if you can place your bet now. If I'm going for a value pick, though, I mean, Lamar Jackson is plus 1,400. The guy's already won it twice. That's interesting. But here's a dark horse candidate for you. And this is if you believe in the Philadelphia Eagles. And our CEO chastised me via text message when I said that the Eagles were overrated from last week's show, but I digressed. The Jalen Hurts at plus 1,600. I'm telling you, if the Eagles are what everyone says that they are, and Jalen Hurts is that guy, and he leads a long run, and they end up going to the Super Bowl, he could win the MVP. And at plus 1,600, that's a pretty good bet. You'd win a lot of money and don't have to put a lot of money down. But Lamar Jackson at plus 1,400, that's shocking to me. Josh Allen at plus 850 is even more shocking in the other way. Josh Allen, in my opinion, should be plus 14, plus 1,500, and he's plus 850 with CJ Stroud at the same odds. It's insane. I don't understand what these numbers are, but Vegas is right more than they're wrong, Coach.
That is true. And yes, I felt the same way about Josh Allen. It felt like his numbers should have come down based upon Buffalo's offseason. I don't know who has the best odds of anybody, any non-quarterback. Maybe Jefferson, but it'd be interesting to see if you had to bet on a non-quarterback. You've got some of those guys we've already talked about, right? Jefferson and TJ Watt and Myles Garrett on the defensive side of the ball, etc. I would guess it's a wide receiver.
Yeah, probably. I'm trying to find those odds right now to see if we can get it. So first non-quarterback, man, they're all quarterbacks.
It's crazy.
Every time, every place I go, they're like, just list the quarterbacks. So this is going to be interesting. We'll see how that goes. I'll see if I can find that out as we go. But yeah, it's incredible. I'm I'm looking now. Yeah, still all quarterbacks. Every list I have are quarterbacks normally dominate the MVP odds list. The last non-quarterback to win MVP was Adrian Peterson in 2012. Here we go. The non-quarterback with the shortest odds is Christian McCaffrey at plus 4,000 and Tyreek Hill at plus 7,500. You're muted, Coach. What are you saying?
I said I'd put money on Christian McCaffrey at plus 4,000. He should have been in that conversation last year, and he was, I think, for a long period of time. So 4,000, wow, that's fantastic.
Those are good odds. And Tyreek Hill would have to have an explosive year to even be in the discussion. But CMC could do it. I think he could. So, all right, let's finish up our topics with the last topic here. On a similar note, Chicago head coach Matt Eberflus is the betting favorite at DraftKings to win NFL Coach of the Year. Does Eberflus as the front runner surprise you at all?
Yes. Well, all right. Wait. Yes and no. Yes, because it's Matt Eberflus of the Chicago Bears, and the notion that he's the coach of the year suggests the Bears wind up winning like 11 games. And that feels like a big stretch. That division is good. That division's good. And that might be the best division in the NFC. And I think the Bears are the worst team. But they've been so hyped. Everybody is expecting so much from Caleb Williams. And granted, they've added a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. We've talked about that. How I think they're 5 guys. When they go 11 personnel, their first 3 receivers, the tight end, the running back, could be as good as any group in football. And the Bears came on and had a good closing stretch to last season. But they're putting so much pressure on Caleb Williams to be great. Like everybody expects him to just be CJ Stroud, and I'm not convinced that he will. And then you have to also factor in that, like the Jets, the Bears have a history of screwing it up. And so I would be very, very hesitant to wager anything on Matt Eberflus.
I'm finding some different odds with different people at the top for the odds-on favorite, and I don't think Eberflus should even be in the discussion. Like, what are we doing? What has this guy done? You could talk about Kevin Stefanski, who's won the award twice. At least he's turned a Browns team into respectability. They've made the playoffs. He's done it with injuries to the most important positions. What has Matt Eberflus done to even invite me to bet $5 on his name? The answer is nothing. And when I see someone like Mike Tomlin, yes, we're Steeler fans, as plus 2,500, what are we doing? I just don't get that at all. Matt Eberflus, no. If he would be the front runner, I would go to a different book because I don't trust that at all. But still, yeah, it's interesting. Oh, and by the way, a little housekeeping here. We'll do this before we get to our player profile. Xavier Howard was in the news for not so great stuff. 1 month ago, June, Xavier Howard supposedly sent explicit content to his ex's son. And so a lot of people were not, yeah, that's interesting. So that might be a reason why Xavier Howard is still a free agent, as we talked about earlier. But we want to finish this up with a player profile. Sad news, really, really sad. Early Saturday morning, Kyrie Jackson, who was a rookie for the Minnesota Vikings, I believe he's a 4th-round draft pick, really talented kid. He was from Maryland, obviously not where I'm from and not where I live, but he was killed in a car accident. There was a drunk driver involved. Horrific. 3 people died. It was Kyrie Jackson and 2 of his high school teammates all together in the vehicle. Coach, what do you want to say about this sad situation?
It's just, it's a terrible story. He seemed like a gregarious, really likable young man who his college coach, Dan Lanning out at Oregon, just had nothing but tremendous things to say about him. Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, similar. He just said he guy who came to work every morning with a big smile on his face and kind of lit up the building. He kind of was expected to start or to challenge for a starting role there in Minnesota. It reminded me, every time I hear about these stories, he's with his high school buddies. They're having a great time, and their lives are taken short by a drunk driver. And my very first year as a football coach, way back in the 1990s, man, I coached a young man named Ron Moretti. I was his position coach. Great young kid. His dream was to go to the Air Force Academy and become a pilot. And I'll never forget, man, like we had a game on a Saturday and Ronnie had screwed something up and I really ripped him as he came off the field. I was young and kind of stupid, you know, too much testosterone. And just sometimes when you're young, you think that like yelling at kids is the way that you're supposed to coach them up. Yeah. And I really ripped Ronnie and I didn't get a chance to say anything to him after the game. And I remember going home and feeling bad about that and being like, hey, look, when I see him on Monday, I got to pick that kid back up. I'm a big believer as a coach. You can rip into guys, but you got to pick them back up. You know, they have to know that you care about them. And that night, that Saturday night, Ronnie and a couple of his other friends went out bowling, just young kids having a great time. And on the way home, they were in a car crash. A drunk driver slammed head on, and Ronnie Moretti lost his life, man, at 16 years old. And I never got to say my piece to him. And that has haunted me for a long time. And it's like a lesson I've lived with because I think about it a lot in the way I deal with young men. I deal with them. And I always think back to Ronnie, like don't ever leave something like undone. You want to fix that up. You want to make your amends. You want to say your piece, pick that kid back up because you don't know. You don't know. Yeah. And you hear about this story, Kyrie Jackson, and you just think, man, that's a life too short. That's so many loose ends, so many things that never got resolved, that never got realized. You can't get that stuff back, man. It's just, I hate these stories.
They're awful. And let me say, you know, your story stands alone. And I'm sure that Ronnie knew, Coach, that you were probably in the heat of battle. We'll put it that way. But let me say this. Anyone that's out there, whether you're of age or not, and you decide that you're going to consume alcohol, there is zero excuses in today's day and age to get behind the wheel of a car and say, I'm good. Call an Uber, call a family member, or tie your shoes and walk. There's nothing more infuriating than when you hear these stories about these three young adults and their lives were taken. It was a 3-car crash. The driver that was drinking, another car that was involved, he walked away unscathed, and then those 3 kids all dead because someone decided, I'm okay, and I'm going to get in a car and drive. It is the peak of irresponsibility for me. So anyone out there listening that consumes alcohol, my gosh, don't be stupid. Just call a ride. It's not a pride thing. Just it's a safety thing. To 2024, we're still dealing with it. It's absolutely shocking. So I thankfully don't have any stories like you do with your player, but I just wanted to take this time to say, my gosh, we got to be better in this regard. We have to be better in this regard. So any final thoughts, Coach?
I'm ready. I'm ready for training camp, man. You know, we've been talking the last couple of weeks about stories like this, which are sad and unfortunate, and doing story. You know, Joe, some stuff I think is interesting from a conversational standpoint about MVP odds and types of things that we covered in this show. But I think everybody's ready for some real football, and it's not real football just yet. But hey, getting the teams back, putting some pads on, getting a look at how guys look early on. That's the beginning of the most exciting time of year. So the best sport on the planet about to get underway. I'm all in for it.
Love it. Make sure you check out Coach's call sheet later this week. And you're also debuting some new stuff on social media. Do you want to plug that now?
Yeah, we've been doing the Gridiron Glossary stuff for a couple of weeks now, which is where you take a concept or a football term and we break it down and we do a video clip and a diagram and just try to expand people's football IQ. And now we're doing some new stuff on play design, some of the best play designs of the 2023 NFL season. We had a little slip screen being run by the Texans on the goal line, a good little coverage beater, and how teams can use formation and motion and things like that to put defenses at disadvantage. So just again, man, just trying to give people some interesting content that they can sink their teeth into as we await what's next.
Love it. Love it. Make sure you check us out for our Steelers coverage on the Steel Curtain Network. You can find me on social media at jhartman, HARTMAN_PIT. We will be back next week for another NFL Whip Round. Coach, in the meantime, take it easy. We'll see you.